Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Asia Society Korea webinar. We're happy that you are able to join us today. As it so happens, we are going to be celebrating more than 6 decades of relations between South Korea and Europe, both the European Union and a number of states within the European Union. And to celebrate that and also to open up a deeper conversation about the past, present, and future of relations between South Korea and both the European Union and some of its member states, we're very happy to have 3 ambassadors joining us today, one from the European Union, Ambassador Maria Castillo-Fernandez, and 2 of very important member states of the European Union, Sweden with Ambassador Daniel Wolven, and the Netherlands with Ambassador Joanne Doornewaard. And we're going to talk a little bit about these relations in a webinar that we're going to entitle Global Pivotal Partners, Europe-Korea Relations in the 21st Century. So we're happy that you're able to join us today. And with that brief introduction set up, I think I'm going to go ahead and do something a little bit different than I usually do in these webinars. And instead of going directly into some questions, perhaps use this platform as a moment to sort of celebrate, as I mentioned, the relationship between South Korea and Europe, and give each of the ambassadors a moment to perhaps say something about the nature, either in the present or in the past, or looking forward to the future of the relationship between their particular political entity that they represent and South Korea. So perhaps we'll start with Ambassador Castillo-Fernandez from the EU. Would you like to say something about the relations between the EU and South Korea?
Thank you, Mason, and very happy to share the floor with my colleagues here today. Well, 60 years is an important moment in Korean life, on gap, and it's a moment also to reflect and to look forward to a new process. And we have done that in the EU-Korea summit 2 weeks ago in Seoul. You know, Korea is not only a strategic partner for European Union and European countries, it is the country where, unique in Asia, we had the 3 agreements which, frame our relationship, cooperation on the one side, a free trade agreement, and crisis management, so the security component on the other side. And all this thing in a new framework where, we have a very challenging situation in Europe with the illegal war in Ukraine by Russia. So that puts the security component very much into the agendas, where whatever is happening in Europe impacts in the Indo-Pacific, and therefore in the Korean Peninsula theater, or in the Northeast Asia or East Asia theater. Certainly tensions are also increasing in this part of the world. In addition, Indo-Pacific is going to become the place where most of the big challenges in the world will certainly be decided in the next years to come. Not only climate, but also health, digital security, and all of that. Both our societies going into a green and a digital transition, which is inevitable, which is what we need to do in order to transform our society. So with this big combination, I think what we decided, with our leaders decided in the summit, is first a big convergence of views in the importance of the international rule-based order in all these issues which we have discussed, how important, and there is a common will to defend democracy, United Nations Charter, human rights principles. These are universal principles. This is not Western against East, or Europe against Asia, or the rest of the world. So this is that convergence of views. And second, look at the next 3 pillars of our relation, which certainly will be the green pillar, the green partnership, which was launched also in the summit, the digital partnership and all the digital innovation cooperation, and the security partnership. So with these 3 pillars, working into the next period of relations, which is very important, where both of us are more aligned, more closer together, speaking with in many of the international issues that are common and that we need to go hand in hand. So working more closely together with these three new pillars in our relation.
Super. It's an excellent laydown to get us started on EU-South Korea relations. Thank you. Ambassador Wolven, anything that perhaps you want to say about looking at the nation-state perspective? Obviously, you can talk about Europe too, but if there's anything in particular you would like to offer about Sweden and its relationship with South Korea, that would obviously be welcome as well.
Thank you, Professor Richey, dear Mason, and I'm also very happy to share the floor with my colleagues from the European Union and from the Netherlands. I actually wanted maybe to tag on a little bit to what Maria just said, and also remind our viewers that Sweden holds the presidency the first 6 months of this year of the Council of the European Union. And when I talk about our priorities, which is three of the main ones, is security, competitiveness, and the green and energy transitions, just to say how important of a partner the Republic of Korea is for us in all of these three areas. Maria spoke about the Russian aggression against Ukraine, which is something that we work day and night on to continue the strong and united response to this aggression. This is about the freedom and security of Ukraine, of course, but it's as much about the freedom and security of Europe and beyond. Here, Korea is a very important partner, and we're going to get into this later, I think, during our discussion. Same with the green transition, incredibly important to us. I can mention many examples. There are battery production in Sweden and in Europe could not be done in such an efficient way if it weren't for Korean involvement. There's production of green steel in Sweden, another area where our partnership with Korea is key. And lastly, I want to mention the issue of competition. I mean, both Europe and the Republic of Korea, we're dynamic, green and forward-looking economic actors. There's certainly a sense in Europe and in Stockholm that Europe is maybe not completely living up to its full economic potential. There we are spending a little bit less on research and development compared to the US and China. And we have put lots of energy into trying to make Europe more competitive. And here, of course, the relation between Europe and South Korea, the relation between Sweden and South Korea is key. It's key on supply chains, it's key on innovation, and it's definitely key on new technologies such as 5G and 6G. So just by virtue of introduction, I wanted to mention a little bit about our EU priorities and the role that Korea has in order to realize those priorities. Thank you.
But I can say that if my experience at the Korea-Sweden night a few days ago, to which I was lucky enough to have an invitation, was indicative. Obviously there's a whole lot going on between Sweden and South Korea. It was really impressive to see first of all, the turnout. It was huge. Ambassador Wolven put together a gigantic party. And all of the stands from the various Swedish enterprises, which are either present in Korea or have some type of partnership with Korean companies, was really impressive, both in the diversity and also in the fact that so many of them were really on the cutting edge. So I think that getting to talk about competitiveness and innovating, I think, is really important. There's a sense I sometimes have that although I think the United States does a lot right, my home country. Sometimes I feel like the United States, at least with respect to, for instance, with China, chooses to sometimes try to keep China from running faster rather than the U.S. trying to run faster itself. And so I think it's really, a great point that you're making, that Europe is trying to innovate more in partnership with countries like South Korea and to run faster together. Ambassador Doornewaard, you get to close us down with these opening set of statements.
Okay, thank you, Mason, and thanks for this invitation to have this discussion together with the colleagues from the EU and from Sweden. The Netherlands, we celebrated our 60 years bilateral relationship 2 years ago during COVID, so we had to downscale that a little bit, did a lot of things online. But last year, really, we could open up. We received our Prime Minister, where we concluded our strategic partnership with Korea. I think we have a very long relationship with Korea. For us, Korea is a very important trade export destination after China and Taiwan. Korea is really a big destination for our exports. So there's a very strong relationship between our countries for doing trade. But right now with this strategic partnership, we really are widening up the scope also in very innovative fields, in new technologies, in security areas. And that in the coming months, that will be more concrete with workshops and all that. So I've been here almost 4 years, and I've seen the attention from Europe, from my country right now, what's happening here in Korea with the Indo-Pacific strategy. Korea is on all the lists, and many visitors right now can come, high-level visitors, to see for themselves what's happening here in Asia, and especially here in Korea. So I think there's a bright future right now, and we really need each other, especially in supply chain. For us, we'll probably touch upon that later. Being both very innovative, our technologies, we share the same concern, and it's very important also to share information and to team up in the world while we share the same kind of values on international law and all that. Just as a brief introduction to that.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you. You know, I think in some way you've each spoken in different ways to something I wanted to get to, in a message that I kind of hoped I would be able to get across in this in this discussion. But perhaps it was Ambassador Doornewaard who put it most concretely in terms of the actual effect that you feel, and that's how much more important Korea has become for Europe. I've been here now for I think 13 or 14 years, if I remember correctly, and I've seen a real dramatic growth in how important South Korea is for Europe, and in the other direction, how important Europe is for South Korea. And I think the way that we notice that most obviously today are, I think, two things. And the first of which is a compliment to each of you, and that is that I've seen the quality of ambassadors from Europe to Korea improve enormously. There was a time when ambassadors from Europe who came to South Korea, were not as perhaps as ambitious or perhaps as hooked in with their country's political and business elite. There was a time when perhaps it was the place where people went as their last stop before they moved on to retirement. And now so many of the ambassadors that we have from Europe, I think, are really top quality people. And I think that that's part of it. And you're obviously, each of you, a part of that as well. And the other way you see it is the throughput coming from Europe into Korea. The number of high-level visitors, the business delegations, the political delegations, and not just the executives, but also the legislative branch. It's just really amazing, I think, how many people are now coming through Korea, to the point where it's hard actually to have meetings with some of you because you're also busy doing other things with the delegations that are coming in. Some of that's catching up a little bit on COVID, I think, but part of it is I really think that this is just the new normal. As the Indo-Pacific has become more important, as Korea has become more important, you see this incredible throughput coming from Europe here as well. And obviously we just had the EU ROC Summit, which is of course another great example of that. If I can move away briefly from some of these sort of questions of high politics and diplomacy and business and supply chain, and we can come back to all of that, of course. But if I can move in a slightly different direction, I think one of the things that might be driving some of this increase or deepening of Europe-South Korea relations is soft power and cultural power. And I wonder if any of you have any thoughts about the way that the relationship in terms of soft power and cultural power between the EU and South Korea has developed, and to what extent that's been an important part of the growing relationship between Europe and South Korea.
No, I mean, I think you're right. When you say how much important Korea has become to Europe, or one other feature is the number of embassies that have opened here, and even in COVID times from Europe, at least 4 more in the last 3 years. And one more to come this year. So it's very important that Korea is now in the agenda of capitals much more than before. And also, and that comes from the soft power. I think we were both soft power countries where we use soft power in a way perhaps that others don't do. And this has attracted, especially on the Korean side, a lot. You see a lot of younger people coming to Korea from Europe, even without a scholarship, even just because they want to be here at this moment, because they want to study here, they want to learn the language. They are attracted by all the big Korean Hallyu and key culture. And I think that's very important that Korea has used that diplomatic tool in a way that has made a reaction from the outside world. Also at the same time that they become more active and less isolated or insulated at the same time. You cannot do it only halfway. So that has, many of my colleagues know, you see so many of these younger Europeans that you find everywhere, which are here because they want to learn about Korea. And of course, diplomacy doesn't move if we don't have people to people moving also behind us and making exchanges possible. And that's the heart of relations between nations. So that element is very important.
Yeah, Mason, you touched on a really important issue of this breadth and depth of the relations now between Korea and Europe and Korea and individual member states in the European Union. And I see it daily when it comes to Korea and Sweden. In fact, for me, it would be hard to find any area today where there's not a substantive collaboration between Sweden and Korea. We see new areas of collaboration where we didn't have that deep cooperation before. Space, for example, has emerged as an important area of cooperation between Sweden and the Republic of Korea. And then there is this thing that Maria pointed to, the Korean wave, which is now hitting, I think, not only Europe, but essentially the entire world with full force, with K-pop and K-drama. And one really tangible effect of that also for Sweden is the amount of Swedish students that are coming to Korea. The popularity of studying the Korean language at Swedish universities and so on and so forth. And there's a little bit on the cultural front, I often say this, there's a little bit of an untold story when it comes to the K-pop industry, which is that much of this music has the involvement of Swedish music producers and songwriters. And there's a wonderful story when SM Entertainment, I think a decade or two back, started scouting for international partners. They went to Europe, they went to the United States, they got responses from certain actors, but maybe not from all, but they were welcomed with open arms in Stockholm. And since then you have a very thriving private, of course, relationship when it comes to music production. And I see this on a daily basis with Korean producers and songwriters traveling to Sweden and the other way around. So this is cultural diplomacy at its best. Doesn't require much of government government support, but it is really connecting our two countries in a way that I think is absolutely fantastic, and it's connecting young generations in both of our countries in a way that clearly wasn't the case before.
That's actually fascinating. I didn't know about the specific connection between Sweden and Korea in the K-pop area. That's actually an interesting piece of information of which I was unaware. Ambassador Doornewaard, any thoughts there or?
Well, to mention, because we always look at trade and security, but I mean, on cultural side, we have a huge program between the Netherlands and Korea already for quite some time, where we exchange artists in residence. We have an MOU with the Arts Council Korea. And this is long-term relationship back and forth. So we also this year we were in the Gwangju Biennale with the Dutch Pavilion with very innovative presentation. So, and we see a lot of Koreans who are interested to come to the Netherlands to study, and usually often also stay there, but also the Dutch are coming back here. So it's both ways, very interesting to see. And sometimes it's really also related to to topics that we have, recycling or climate change. They take forward topics that are not, they were not on the agenda here that much. And you see a lot of interest from the Korean side right now, the youngsters to go to the Netherlands to study this, but also to have a cultural way of dealing with that. And of course, we have the old time, the Van Gogh and all that. So we have a lot of Korean tourists going to the Netherlands, queuing up for the exhibitions in Amsterdam, and that continues to happen. And that's both ways. We have right now see a lot of interest from the Dutch side to come here to visit Korea. A lot of in that exchange students, both ways. The Dutch coming here, but also Korean students going to the Netherlands, where they can follow a curriculum or a university, because it's the teaching is in English, so it's very easy to follow. And I think that's an important thing, because the Koreans usually when they study abroad, they focus on the US. And I think in Europe we really show right now we have very high standard universities, high rank, teaching in English, and much cheaper than the Americans, and offering a lot. So, and I think that's opening up right now, that also with this year we show again the possibilities and opportunities that there are in Europe.
I think that's a fair point. And as someone who grew up in the U.S. and went to university in the U.S., I can assure you that the difference in cost is significant. And it's a real competitive advantage, I think, in some ways that Europe has, to be honest with you. Many of the universities are really excellent, and the value that you get for them for the price, I think, is quite astonishing. I personally see that, Korean students see that more and more, but I wish they would see it a little bit faster. Okay, so we've kind of danced a little bit airily over the big gauzy positives of the relationship between Europe and South Korea, in a sort of general way, and celebrating the past and the present, and talking a little bit about culture and soft power. But perhaps we can move down a little bit more into some detail and into some of the nitty gritty. And I think I'll start here with Ambassador Wolven. Sweden has historically a special relationship with the Korean Peninsula, in part because of its role as a member of the Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission, which, for those of you at home who are watching this don't know, is a military entity that monitors the armistice along the demilitarized zone and the military demarcation line here. Sweden is one of the neutral nations who helps monitor that, along with Switzerland as representatives on the southern side, and then I think it was Poland and Czech Republic on the northern side. But then also, let's say a little bit unofficially, Sweden has functioned historically as a diplomatic facilitator between South Korea, North Korea, or between North Korea and Europe, or North Korea and the rest of the world. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a laydown on where we are in that sort of historical special relationship? Has that diminished somewhat because of the changing nature of North Korea, or perhaps because of the assertiveness of South Korea? Or do you think that role is still as important and vibrant as it has been previously?
Thanks for the historical kind of rundown and reminder of what the NNSC is. I think that the first thing to say about Sweden's role is that this is a long engagement. I mean, it dates back to the Korean War and to our provision of a field hospital back then. Sweden, of course, in 1953 became a member of the NNSC. It's now 70 years that we have had Swedish and Swiss soldiers in Panmunjom day and night to oversee the implementation of the armistice agreement. And if you look historically, I think it's the combination really of our presence at the NNSC, our embassy in Pyongyang. We established diplomatic relations with Pyongyang 50 years ago now, and of course our presence and engagement in South Korea. Combination of this has given Sweden historically a role to play. Now, a lot of things have happened since 1953. You mentioned what happened in 1995 when the DPRK stopped recognizing the mandate of the NNSC as regards to the north. There's currently no NNSC member on the northern side of the military demarcation line. But on the southern side, the NNSC continues to carry out its task. And I wanted also to remind everyone here that over this time, the NNSC has actually been given expanded tasks, which now include, on request or an invitation, to observe exercises and training on the UNC or the Combined Force Command level or ROK only exercise. And I think this is important when tensions are running high, as we can see now, to have a third party that can verify that exercises are defensive in nature. And that is one of the key roles of the NNSC. And you also, as you put it, we played a facilitating role. Sweden has played a facilitating role on the peninsula. The last meetings between the US and the DPRK, of course, took place in Stockholm during the period of relative détente, one could say, from 2017 to 2019. So I think the important thing when you talk about Sweden is this expertise that we built up over time, our willingness to continue to play a facilitating role when that is possible. Of course, the situation now is more difficult than it was a few years back, but we've seen this over the past decades. We've seen difficult times. We've seen times where it has been possible to play a facilitating role, and we are absolutely ready to continue to play that role when it is requested and when it is possible.
Do you have any idea of when Sweden's embassy in Pyongyang might open back up again? Do we have any visibility on that?
It's a good question. I mean, all I can say really on that is that when it is possible to return, we are keen to get back as soon as we can to Pyongyang. And I think that's not only Sweden. There are, of course, other countries also very keen to be back in Pyongyang. I think it's important that we get back sooner rather than later, because the lack of day-to-day contact with the North Korean counterparts, the lack of visibility of the situation in Pyongyang and so on and so forth that many of our countries had before COVID, that lack is certainly not contributing to our understanding of the situation right now. I can't answer when Sweden will be back, but I can assure you that as soon as there's a possibility for us to get back to Pyongyang, we will immediately grab that opening.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you're right. You know, the lack of visibility in North Korea right now is a problem, and the embassies being closed doesn't make that any easier, obviously. And if I could shift gears real quick, I don't want to give you too much whiplash, but shift gears briefly and perhaps turn to Ambassador Doornewaard. We'll maybe move on from the sort of historical and security relationship, sort of in a traditional sense, and talk perhaps a little bit about something that you mentioned earlier, and all of you have mentioned in some way or another, and is obviously something that's incredibly present right now in global diplomacy, and that's high technology and how trade and supply chains and the shifting in risk acceptance among countries is taking place. And the Netherlands, of course, is a major high-tech player. And so I guess my question to you would be, what is the sort of Dutch, technology trade relationship with Korea, and how does that fit into larger issues of economic and supply chain security that have become so much more salient over the last 3 to 5 years?
Yes, as I mentioned before, we have this very vibrant trade relationship between Korea and the Netherlands. For us, it's the third largest export destination in Asia after China and Taiwan. We are both very innovative economies that are highly complementary. So we don't compete, we are complementary, especially in high tech. And it's mainly in this semiconductor sector that we are active. Here's the Dutch company ASML, who provides the semiconductor giants like Samsung and SK Hynix with the most advanced technology in lithography machines that are currently available on the market. And these machines make chips again. They produce chips in Korea that are critical to many other products in the world. And that makes the Dutch-Korean relationship very important for global supply chain stability. And these chips that are being produced here, they find their way again back to the Netherlands and to Europe. For the Netherlands, it's really in electronical appliances, but also the EV, the electronic vehicles right now that really are important in the Netherlands. And I mean, so it's both ways that we produce things that we need from each other. And against that backdrop of all these geopolitical challenges, the economic challenges that we have, and the importance of the supply chain stability, we really see an increase between the Netherlands and Korea discussing these issues. We both think that free trade practices are very important. We see them under pressure, and then it's very important to team up together. And that's what's happening right now with the goal of supply chain security, stability, and that's something not only the Netherlands is doing by itself, we do it together with the EU. But there's a lot of contact between us, and it's important to work together in that sense because we need each other. So we have something, ASML, but there are many other companies that also are very active in this chip industry, and Korea developing all these products that needs this most advanced chips. So that makes us partners in a sense in the world that we have to hold our hands and to share information, to proceed, and that we all both have an interest in a free market, that the supply chain can be secure, and partners that really are interdependent, that we team up together. So in that sense, and that will be even more important in the future. So because you asked about the near future, that will only increase, I think, the next 3-5 years.
I think that's a great answer. And of course, you mentioned ASML, which at least I think the last time I checked was Europe's most valuable publicly traded company. I think I may be wrong about that, but at least at one point it was, and certainly among the tech companies it is. And this shows A, my ignorance, B, I think also how quickly ASML has grown and become more important. Just a few years ago, I was down in the very south part of Korea on an island called Namedo. I don't know if you know, it's lovely. And I was vacationing with a number of friends, and there were several groups of friends who were there. And one of those groups of friends had invited someone who works for ASML here in Korea, and I'd never even heard of the company before. And I asked him what it is that ASML did, and he looked at me with all the seriousness in the world in his eyes, and he said, "We make light." And I thought to myself, that's an amazing description for a company. It sounds like something out of the Bible. I mean, God making light was one of the first things that he did, and this is what this company does. And then afterwards, he explained a little bit more of what he meant. But functionally speaking, that's what they do. The lithography machines really make a special form of light that can etch these, that are the substrate for being able to etch these chips. It's an astonishing company, and I think it's really fascinating how the Netherlands has grown up in that way. If I can just ask a quick follow-on question. Along with the European Union itself, France, Germany, and the Czech Republic, the Netherlands also has an Indo-Pacific strategy. How does Korea fit into that?
Very much. So we have indeed, these countries have worked on this, seeing what's happening here in the world. So we developed this Indo-Pacific strategy. And I mean, we really see partners like Korea playing a very important role in that, how we can team up. And then, Germany, France, Czech also, and now the EU. So I think it's more or less the same kind of focus on this region and on cooperation and working together on topics like climate change, security, freedom of navigation. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can work upon together, and Korea plays an important role in that sense. So, yeah. That's so it's and right now we have the Indo-Pacific strategy, so the EU Indo-Pacific strategy. So there's a lot of, and I think that a lot of the interest right now, you see our chiefs of command are coming over here. The defense industry is suddenly very interested what's happening here. I mean, Korea produces also a lot material, so that there's a growing interest in Korea. We already mentioned that, but it's manifold in many sectors.
I'd like to come back to the defense point in just a moment, but before we come back to that, or maybe almost as a bridge sort of to that, I guess I'll maybe shift away from the happy good time talk. Every relationship has its ups and downs and its positives and its defects. If I could sort of throw this question out there, what perhaps in the EU-South Korea relationship isn't working as well as it should? Where are there areas for improvement, shall we say? Perhaps Ambassador Castillo-Fernandez wants to weigh in on that.
Of course, not all relations, so everything goes well. I think what is important is to maintain a trust between like-minded partners, which is very important when things go bad and we need each other. Sometimes they give Europe for granted. In many ways, we are not a difficult partner. Things work. We have a relation that is very long-standing and fluid. But we still have some issues that have been there for a long time, bilateral issues of market access that, despite our free trade agreement, are always there for many, many years. I was here in 2005, 2008, and the same issues are still here when I come back now. So these are ones. And second, perhaps we will need to do more. We are below potential in everything which is research and innovation. So we speak a lot about digital and big collaboration in many in technological, and we need each other much more now. But until now, the collaboration between research institutes, even universities, is still much below our potential. So we need to activate that. We want Korea as an associated member of the big European program on research and innovation, Horizon Europe, and we want to enhance, our exchanges because there is so much demand of students wanting to come here, and also we need to push Koreans to go out and to learn languages and to be. You have different cultures in Europe. So this is important. We are going to organize, for example, next week a big study in Europe Fair with more than 40 universities of Europe coming to Korea to present themselves, to try to capture. So things like this, you need to accompany a bit the big digital and green transitions with much more working together in issues where, it would not be possible for Korea to do it alone. If we speak about artificial intelligence and we speak about quantum, 5G, 6G, Danielle has mentioned that before. In all these areas, even in semiconductors, you need researchers to get together and start looking at the future. And then we can come with a framework, with norms, with standards that allow, for open and equal fair trade, which is what we are going to do now with our negotiations on digital trade by the rules. So you need both of the areas and move together. And perhaps we are, as I said, below potential.
Okay, that's a completely fair answer. If I could follow up, perhaps, not so much pointing in any way to this being a disappointment, but I think, at first, perhaps there was some unease in Europe and among people who watched Korea with respect to what South Korea's response would be to the war in Ukraine and Russia's illegal war of invasion there. I think most people believe, I think most experts believe that South Korea has largely been on the right side of history and has largely done what it is that they're supposed to do. But I wonder if I could get any thoughts from either of you, from any of you really, about your assessment of how South Korea has done in terms of its response to Russia's attack against Ukraine.
I mean, for me, just to say that, as you said, it has been with us all along. You can only read the first part of the statement, joint statement in the summit. There is a very strong words of condemnation against Russia, of support of Ukraine, and it has, mostly aligned with all our sanctions, in particular export controls and others. So it has co-sponsored with us resolutions in United Nations. This is about United Nations principles, as I said, territoriality, integrity, sovereignty, and Korea knows that very well. So I think we have them on the right side, supporting as much as they can. Everyone doesn't give the same amount or the same type of aid to Ukraine, but Korea has been willing to be there and to even preparing now in the reconstruction. So when we have reached out to Korea, Korea has been by our side, supporting Ukraine, condemning Russia for what it's doing, and we hope it can continue to do so.
Then I'll shift to the other big revisionist country that we see in the world. That's China. And maybe, I guess, in our last sort of 5 minutes before we log off, how do you assess Europe and South Korea in terms of cooperation and convergence on how to deal with increasing challenges from China to the regional and the global order? And again, I'll throw that out, I guess, to any of you. Perhaps Ambassador Wolven, you might want to jump in on this.
No, I just wanted to say that on China, my prime minister recently gave a speech where he pointed to, among other things, he brought up the question of de-risking, and he brought up the question how to build an approach to China in close partnerships with others. De-risking is, of course, something that many countries talk about these days, being aware of vulnerabilities, reducing excessive dependencies that may have implications for our economies and for national security. We bring this up certainly not to enforce any hostile policies towards China. On the contrary, this is simply what all countries, including China, do today to safeguard their national interests. And I think you see that on a national level, you see it on an EU level, this work to kind of address economic distortions, economic coercion, and Joanne mentioned it earlier, also to mitigate the risk of supply chain disruptions, which we have seen in the past. And as we in Europe increase capacity in areas where Europe is heavily dependent on China, for example, supply of rare earth minerals, Korea emerges, I think, as a key actor when it comes to the de-risking strategies. Certainly of my country. Certainly when it comes to supply chains. So I think there is that's an area where we can find very concrete partnerships with South Korea to reduce dependencies, but also, as we mentioned in the beginning of this discussion, not only to mitigate dependencies, but to actually collaborate further when it comes to certain new sensitive and critical technologies, where we certainly feel in Sweden that Korea is a country that's not only at the technological forefront, but it's an open, democratic country where we have a lot of trust. So there are two aspects, two sides to that de-risking coin. But on both sides, I think Korea, for us, certainly emerges as a very, very important actor.
Ambassador Doornewaard, any thoughts about EU-Korea relations within the larger context of de-risking vis-a-vis China, or alternately, areas of cooperation with China. I don't know to what extent all three, or in this case, all two countries plus the EU, all are in agreement that China represents, an economic competitor, a partner in certain areas such as climate change, at least potentially, and then a systemic rival in other ways. I don't know to what extent that's shared among all three of our embassies, but in any event, Ambassador Doornewaard, if you want to weigh in a little bit on that EU-Korea relationship in the context of China, that'd be great.
For us, China is an important still trading partner, and I mean, if you talk about the technologies and all that, and semiconductor and all that, so they produce also chips and also old chips or things that are not highly developed that we need for our machines, for our fridges and all that. So there's a cooperation just going on, and we really look at supply chain de-risking. And that's something that we do together with Korea and with our partners in Europe. So it's really to see where are the sensitive areas, and then like almost surgical to see, okay, where we can cooperate and where we should be a little bit more reluctant to see how we proceed. So it's we need partners in that sense, and then Korea is a very good partner, and we team up also with the EU partners in that sense.
Right, that's a totally fair answer. Ambassador Castillo-Fernandez, anything you want to say to close this down, and we'll go ahead and finish up with you getting the last word among the three ambassadors here.
Well, I mean, just a little bit to add on China, the partner, rival, and a competitor is a great language of the 2019 European Union strategy on China. So I think there we have an agreement. The only thing you see now is that there is a debate in many parts of Europe, but also around the world, to try to rebalance, recalibrate with another context, international context. And of course, as my colleagues have said, the importance of working together to avoid economic or supply over dependencies. In any case, we have seen the example of Russia for Europe. So we are all doing the same. Korea is doing the same, diversification, trying to create less dependence, trying to work for more fair and open trade, and mainly a rule-based order. And I come back from what I said at the very beginning. It's so important that we have partners like Korea, which want to defend and promote the United Nations rule-based order that we have. And this is in many areas. If you take climate, this is about Paris Agreement. If you take working with other partners in the Pacific, this is about SDGs and how we can, with Korea, work with other partners in the region in their green and digital transitions. If you take non-proliferation, this is about, what is happening here in the Korean Peninsula and other parts of the world. So this is about the UN system that has to work, that we cannot have blockage in the UN Security Council, that block, resolutions that have been made, or implementation of resolutions that have been made, or even international principles. So all comes to we need to continue working very closely with Korea to defend this international rule-based order, which is the one that is put for all of us, and convince partners that are not so convinced, and they think there is a need for a new international order with different centralities. And that, I think, that was the message also of President Yoon when he was and the common view of our leaders at the summit in Seoul in the 22nd of May, how, what the importance of these international or rule-based principles in to try to find ways to work together with all the very important challenges we have.
Well, I think that's an excellent way to close this down. So thank you very much for that. I wish we'd had a few extra minutes to perhaps, talk a little bit about how we could envision a sort of increasing growth in the relationship between the Euro-Atlantic area and Indo-Pacific, and how some of the like-minded partners, in NATO and in the EU could work with the partners, here in the Indo-Pacific region. But perhaps we'll have to save that for another meeting and at another time. In any event, I want to thank, first of all, everyone who has been watching this webinar today. I think we've had a real treat getting to hear the insights from these three ambassadors. And second of all, I would like to thank them, Ambassador Maria Castillo-Fernandez from the European Union, Ambassador Daniel Wolven from Sweden, and Ambassador Joanne Doornewaard, who will soon, unfortunately for us, but I'm sure happily for her, be moving on to other projects and other postings. And we obviously wish you a wonderful continuation to your life and career outside of Korea. I know you spent it well here, and I'm sure that you've had a wonderful time, and we'll take excellent memories with you. And at least I will take excellent memories of all of our interactions while you were here as well. So thank you very much for your time and your service here. And like I said, thanks to all three of you for joining, and thanks to everyone for watching. This is our last Asia Society Korea webinar before the summer. We'll take a break for a few months, and we'll come back in September or October with another one on a different topic. So thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.